Well, music is it's like language, you know. It's a better way of conversing. If I just talk to you and use words, I can describe things, but I can't describe like the real things, the deep things. But music allows you to express your inner emotional life where conversational language fails. I mean, we could get into the neurology of it. There are reasons. Did you know that the part of the brain that processes music is it's there for infants who haven't learned a language yet. It's for pre-language communications. So a mother cooing to a little baby goes, "Oh, look at the baby," right? And that's music. We don't know the words when we're little babies, but we can understand the tones. And it's, oh, and those intervals convey something emotional. Amazing Grace. That cycle of notes, those intervals register deep inside of us. And that's why a song like Amazing Grace stays around for hundreds of years. So music is a better language if you're really going to try to describe how you feel.
One of the first musical memories I have was I was at the party with my father and people were listening to music and dancing, and I was sitting on a table, and next to the table there was a big ashtray that looked like a drums. And the moment I heard the music, and it was really groove music like funk, I started to drum on this ashtray. And there was a woman sitting and watched that and saw that and said, "That's amazing how you intuitively start to move on that ashtray in a rhythmic sense and to drum." So probably that's one of the initiations that naturally my affinity to rhythms was very strong. Then later I told my mother that I wanted to play drums, and she took that very serious, because in that time it was not possible to study drums for children at the music school. So she looked for a private teacher and found an interesting drum teacher from the United States, who then started to work with me as a child. A little later then I saw a guy on a piano in our school playing some boogie woogie, and this inspired me a lot. I was running home to my mother and told her I want to learn this music, this rhythmic music on the piano, not like the classical stuff, but this real groove music. But again, in that time it was not possible to study that at the music school. There was no teacher for blues, boogie woogie, jazz in the Zurich Music School. So she looked for a private teacher, found one who was before studying in Berkeley and now teaching in Zurich, and he taught me then boogie woogie, blues, jazz standards, Brazilian music, and then later Gershwin when I was about 12, and also some Bartók as a rhythmic classical music. That inspired me a lot, and a few years later, with about 15, I went to a classical, very strict teacher who started to teach me classical music, although I was not able to read. I only listened and watched till then. So I had to learn to read music, and he supported me very much because he also liked jazz, but taught me classical music. So I was about 5 years with this Russian-Swiss teacher for classical piano, and in that time I learned to play a lot of styles, also traditional classical music and very modern abstract classical music.
La storia con Mischa Alperin, musicista, compositore, pensatore, guru, come ogni tanto mi piace chiamarlo anzi. È un musicista che consiglio a tutte e tutti di andare ad ascoltare. È una storia lunga, è una storia alla quale sono molto legato ed è nata tanti anni fa. Da studente del Conservatorio di Parma, mi ritrovo a partecipare a una masterclass e a un suo concerto in occasione del Festival Parma Jazz Frontiere. All'epoca ero uno studente più o meno giovane di pianoforte classico, jazz e composizione. Nella classe di jazz ero uno studente, un allievo, come si dice ai tempi, di Roberto Bonati, il contrabbassista e compositore Roberto Bonati, ed è grazie a Roberto appunto che sono entrato in contatto con Mischa Alperin. Mi ricordo appunto di questa scena, auditorium del Conservatorio di Parma, mi ha colpito questa energia straordinaria che sinceramente ho trovato in pochissime persone su questa terra, qualcosa veramente di straordinario. Credo che poi io abbia un mio personale come dire, una mia personale connessione con questa energia, forse perché ho ritrovato delle cose che ricercavo già in quel periodo. Insomma, morale della questione, vedo questa masterclass e mi ricordo di aver visto un pianista, un musicista che a un certo punto che passa da certe discussioni che mi colpiscono, certe tematiche, e mi ricordo di averlo visto suonare divinamente, poi a un certo punto vedo dei tubi di plastica, vedo che comincia a suonare con dei tubi di plastica su uno Steinway e a un certo punto ovviamente questo tipo di pensiero dietro la musica mi affascina enormemente, quindi vado a trovarlo dietro le quinte, se vogliamo. Eravamo comunque in un ambiente abbastanza familiare, abbastanza, come dire, disteso e molto open e aperto anche al dialogo. E mi ricordo che parlando gli chiedo un paio di cose in inglese e non so, questa connessione è veramente immediata, nel senso che ho ritrovato anche in questa persona al di là del fatto che fosse una persona di una cultura grandiosa riguardo a tutto quello che può essere la connessione umana e spirituale con lo strumento, e questo approccio è chiarissimo dal primo momento in cui si parla con Mischa Alperin che c'è qualcosa di speciale in questa cosa qua.
This is one of those releases I would call a big release in many ways. So I live now in Berlin, but it took a while, you know. Actually, I actually never moved away from the place where I was born. Let's face it. That's as a matter of fact, I was just living in my parents' house, you know. Well, I had my own apartment, so we just renovated that. But I actually lived in a barn, you know. Funnily enough, in that very barn where my brother started to make music, so that became then my house. So it was like an extension of the main farm house. But anyway, so I was living there, and that one of the reasons was because like I started my business there, you know. So I had clients there. I was a graphic designer and so on and so on. So anyway, so I lived a good amount of my time at this place, but you know, I always had a strong relationship to Berlin, and I always wanted to be here or spend time here or just hang around here. And you know, here I am. I live now in Berlin, and it became my new home, you know. But on the other hand, I'm very much aware of my roots, and I do think that, you know, a certain awareness of where you're coming from and what you're carrying around with you, that's very important. And this I realized only when I arrived here. So this is kind of a tribute to my hometown, as well as the music is a tribute to the music I loved so much from the 70s, like this German tradition of experimental music, like this very long out, like extended pieces of music, very hypnotic, very, you know, calming, pushing the borders, you know, kind of what music can do, you know, in terms of repeating and changing or slow changes. And in elsewhere, like this came together for me, like, because so my roots as a person, as a being, you know, coming from this countryside, having grown up on this small farm in this village, and knowing like the landscape there, the countryside, like, so I used to say, like, I still know like every tree by its name, you know. When I'm coming back home, I could say hello to any being there, which is, you know, feels quite awkward. So I have this all in my heart, like, and the music, and so like this is like, yeah, the tribute I wanted to spend. Plus there's also something in the name. So short before I did this, well, not really short before, but wasn't that long before I recorded this album, my mom passed away, and the name of my mom is Elisabeth. So, and the short form of Elisabeth in German is Else. Else, you know, we wouldn't say that, but Else. And since I'm missing her so much, I was like, where's Else? Elsewhere. This was so obvious. And elsewhere is also the place, you know, it's somewhere else, not here. It's out there in the countryside, you know. And even the names of the tracks, these are like local names of places and from this village, which kind of have this sort of awkward quality, you know. Probably like as a side story, you know, when I started to read things like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings, I was so amazed by the names of the places and you know, which were there in the books, because I thought like, this could be like here, you know, this could be like this forest over there, or this small stream here that could have the same names like in those books, and therefore like I use those names just because, you know, they have this strange quality, you know, nobody would know what this actually means, and this is kind of a representation of yeah, being rooted, you know.
So this first time I was in Pittsburgh in the year 2000, I think. We could say that's like 23 years ago. And then I was walking around with my clarinet. It was 6 in the morning. It wasn't open yet. Just playing little bird-like gestures. And mostly the birds were not so interested. But one bird, the white-crested laughing thrush, a common bird in India, Southeast Asia, I played this phrase, do-do-do-do, and he went boop, 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 boop. And then do-do-do-do, boop, boop. And then we didn't copy each other pretty quickly. We were playing with each other. I don't think that copying is a sign of like musical intelligence, as some people do. But together we were making this music. And then I thought, this is pretty cool. And that made me realize, surprising things can happen if you play music with other creatures. That was the beginning of my interest in this. And I was puzzled that kind of interesting music happened. I wanted to know, how much do we know what the birds are doing? How much is it honest to say birds make music? Or how much is it just wishful thinking, imagination? And that was the beginning. And then I started traveling around trying to find other birds to play with. I went to Australia, where there's a bird called the superb lyre bird, L-Y-R-E, with a tail shaped like a lyre, the Greek instrument. And this is one of the craziest bird songs anywhere on the planet, really interesting to play with. And this journey years later led me to Nightingales in Berlin, which was my last big book, with many different musicians up in the middle of the night in this city in Germany playing with birds. And it turns out that a city can be a great place to interact with nature, and Berlin is a great place to play music with nightingales. And every year I do this. I just came from there today. And the last 2 days we were playing concerts with nightingales and other creatures, and always interesting things happen. Always there are surprising moments, and always human musicians are changed when they start to do this. I think over time, the biggest thing I've changed in my approach is to not imagine I'm doing it all myself as some kind of heroic figure, you know, daring to explore where no one has gone before. I want to bring other people along now. I want to make it a kind of collective group project. I'll say, come along, you join us. How about you come? Really getting people together and making it a kind of collective, resounding experience, like church bells ringing in a city over and over again from around and around. Humans and birds and whales can fit together in some kind of musical experience. Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's very surrounding, yeah. You could probably play with that.
Il momento in cui ho scelto di fare il musicista penso sia stato circa negli ultimi anni di superiori, quando in realtà ho cominciato a studiare musica con il mio primo insegnante, che è stato Edu Ebling, un contrabbassista brasiliano che però viveva qua a Venezia. Lì è stato il momento in cui ho capito che forse il mio percorso sarebbe stato quello della musica. Quindi diciamo che il momento è stato quando ho cominciato a studiare musica. Prima suonavo come autodidatta, suonavo inizialmente il basso elettrico prima di passare al contrabbasso, ed è stato proprio grazie allo studio appunto con Edu Ebling che mi sono anche innamorato del contrabbasso, e poi lì ho scelto di intraprendere, come dire, il percorso degli studi musicali, che mi ha portato poi a seguire i corsi di jazz al Conservatorio di Vicenza e a scegliere effettivamente di fare della musica la mia vita e la mia professione.
So it was in around the year 2006 that I, became much aware of the fact that I didn't really have anything tangible that I was doing. Like at that time, music was already mostly digital and files, right? So like just not something you could take into your hands. Obviously I was making CDs, and that was sort of like something that I could go and show my parents. For example, look at, I've made this CD, there's music on it, you can play it. Okay, but I realized there wasn't really something that encapsulated like the bigger idea. And so I got lucky that I had this idea to say, okay, I kind of asked myself, what do I have that nobody else has? And how can I turn that thing into an object rather than just keeping it as an idea? It turned out that it was my knowledge and my experience with the playing technique of the touch instrument, which was the Chapman stick and the war guitar at that point. So I decided, okay, so what happens if I take my knowledge and I'm asking a great luthier to build an instrument with me that sort of, where the instrument sort of is built on the knowledge about the technique. And that's what the Touch Guitars U8 became, this instrument. It was funny because I went to Ed Reynolds, a luthier in Austin, Texas, and I told him, Ed, I'd really want an instrument that looks and functions and works totally like a traditional guitar. I don't want it to have anything special about it. I don't want anything to distract from the music. things that happened, you know, with the Chapman stick, for example, because it looks cool as different form, and like so, like you kind of like get distracted from the mere fact of that it's just a guitar-like instrument, right? And so I went to him with these ideas. I said, okay, it has to hang like this, and we need to make sure that the thin strings, they sound as loud and thick as the thick strings. And so I had a list of things I wanted to do, and we started building this instrument. And when I first held the prototype in my hand about 6 months later, I never looked back. I never went back to any other instrument. It was just so great to see that this concept, this idea of infusing a traditional guitar instrument, traditional design even, with all the detailed knowledge I had about the technique and how the instrument should be, that really made such a big difference. And like one of the things that makes me most happy in my life is when I see people that start playing a U8, how they start making music right away. So where it's not that huge learning curve where you think that you have to dedicate your whole life to being able to play it, right? So what happened to me initially with the Chapman stick. And yeah, I mean, the Touch Guitars has been going for like almost, it's 15 years now, 15 or 16 years. And a few years ago, I passed the business on to somebody else, so I'm not involved in the operations anymore. And it's my friend Stefan who runs the business now, and he's selling way more instruments than I ever have. So I'm very happy about that. And it's a constantly growing, a source of joy and a little bit of income, because people, they also come to me for lessons. And it's a wonderful thing. And I'm still sort of like the main ambassador out there playing the instrument live on stages.
Well, now that I've spent the greater part of this conversation really painting a picture of the points of departure. The sound, as I had said earlier on, is a place. And within this place, there are these messages. And we tap into it to understand a broader idea of existence. But then it becomes a philosophical question. And if we think historically, the first encounters of the colonizers with Africans, they deemed Africans to be people that operated outside of irrationality. And as a result, they did not have a philosophical or intellectual tradition. And many years later, another anthropologist and philosopher named Temple, who came from Europe, started to say, well, these people have a philosophy, and that philosophy is based on their idea of Bantu. So within Bantu there is Ntu, and within Ntu there is Ubuntu, which is a praxis of Ntu. So Ntu is really a philo-praxis, a way of situating oneself within an idea of holism. So Ntu has 4 paradigms: Kintu, Hantu, Muntu, and Kuntu. And these paradigms in themselves is an invocation of environment, invocation of being with other people, invocation of time and space concepts, and invocation of aesthetic and beauty. So Ntu operates in these 4 paradigms, but it makes a claim that these are intrinsically intertwined. So it means a way of being is a way of sensing and loving environment, a way of touching and feeling, but also a way of being is a way of being in a collective agreement with others. So we have a saying in my culture saying, Umuntu, umuntu, ngabantu. Umuntu, a person, ngumuntu is a person, ngabantu, in the context of other human beings. So in other words, in the Bantu people, we do not exist as individuals. So what qualifies your humanity is your connection to others. Without connection to others, we say, akangesiyena umuntu. If a person does not have a connection to society, we say he's not a person or she's not a person. So this leads to a constant realignment with others, which is necessary to produce your own humanity. So the individual can only exist in the context of others. But this expands, it questions the notions of time and space. It says you have to be sensitive to space, you have to be sensitive to surrounding in order for you to be a being. It doesn't end there. It says there are these intangible paradigms of beauty, of sound, of visuals. And these things complete your humanity. So being a muntu is to be constantly in touch with the sound of the birds that we are hearing, to understand it as a lexicon, as a language that is keeping this world alive. And later, of course, this informs the musicality. There is a sense in which we live in a musical universe. You know, the arrangement of the trees, the explicitness of the rivers and how they flow into others. All of these things make up the Ntu philosophy. So I play my music situated in Ntu understanding and Ntu philopraxis, which makes my sound attentive to surrounding, to beauty, to love, to joy, you know. So this is a way that I come now to create my own way of languaging jazz, perhaps which is not an obvious way in the United States, maybe. But this is a way of creating a lexicon that is based on my cultural nuance. It's based on the Nguni people. And this, of course, has made me to think critically about this idea of divination or the throwing of the bones, which taps into ideas of improvisation and the worlds that are unseen. So in closing this idea of Ntu, I use the idea of divination as a way of suggesting that music is a way of giving language to unseen worlds.
I was listening. Music is about listening first and foremost. I don't know. I don't know what music is. I mean, you could say organized sound by humans, or it's in the ear of the beholder. Music is in the ear of the beholder. I mean, it is something that it's a term that we use to differentiate certain types of sounds from other types of sounds. So in a certain way, it's kind of prejudiced already, the term music. I mean, all terminology is helpful to a certain degree, and then it's also, at some point, obfuscates the reality. I mean, I just played a concert of music right now, but I also hear music around me everywhere at every moment in time. For me, the concert really doesn't begin or end. It's like all a continuation from the Big Bang or before that, whatever it was. But obviously, it is something that I'm very invested in and have been my entire life. And so it's something that I care very much about, even if I can't necessarily define what it is. But it's a sound and it's listening. I make music for people to listen and to help focus the sense of listening. Music is one of those things that we all know when we hear it. And it's also a deep connection with the source of all existence. It's how we communicate information throughout generations, across geopolitical divides, borders. It's a way to connect with others intimately and immediately without words being spoken. It's one of the funnest things for me to do. Is necessary.
I think like the most influential music or not most influential, but like the first things that I heard was in my home and was rock. Argentine rock, a lot of also punk from my brother, and sometimes jazz. I remember my father had some jazz albums. I remember listening Charlie Parker, but it didn't hunt me in that moment, you know. And I think one of the artists that I got to know like by myself and like I discovered and that made a change on me was like, first of all, Patti Smith, that I really love her work. I love her writings and her, how her life philosophy. And I also love Bikini Kill, that is a punk band. And they're all about like, they're all very, feminist artists. And I know that changed me. Like knowing this music, knowing these musicians, it inspires you, you know, to find female musicians and that they are so powerful in the way they express. And yes, and then I got a lot into jazz music and improvised music, but I feel always that first steps that I did listening is always with me, and that for a while I tried to say, oh no, that is over, you know, you listen now to another kind of music, you grow but with time I realized that was also myself, and that I don't want to reject parts of myself, and that I love, and that also makes my sound a little bit harsh, a little bit, sometimes it's very subtle, sometimes it's noisy, and when I compose music or when I do I don't know, like videos, when I do films, I work a lot with these both things, with the most, like more beautiful in a way, things that like you can see them, that they are like, or you can hear them, that you recognize something that it's familiar or that no, but you know, something more melodic or colorful, and then, or figurative, and then I like going to the destructive side and destroying film, destroying sound. And I think in between those extremes, I try to explore as much as possible.
Allora, ti sorprenderò con effetti speciali, nel senso che forse per la prima volta, rivelo, mi sembra un termine un po' eccessivo, insomma. Comunque mi viene di soffermarmi sul fatto che i ricordi più grossi dei miei primi anni, che sono stati quando avevo 5 e mezzo, 6, 7, quindi, sono gli odori. E sono odori per esempio, l'odore dei dischi a 78, proprio l'odore dei dischi a 78, non solo i suoni. I suoni erano legati molto agli odori, oppure l'odore del giradischi che avevamo, che era un vecchio mobile di legno, dove sentivamo questi 78. E senza dire naturalmente la chitarra di mio padre, perché poi è vero che la suonava lui, però io la toccavo quando non c'era lui ogni tanto, eccetera, eccetera. Molto gli odori, anche le copertine di questi 78, che insomma avevano un odore particolare, inconfondibile, che ancora è rimasto in qualche neurone, non so. E poi i primi suoni, sono tutti i suoni che hanno un po' disegnato e formato la mia vicenda musicale. Proprio ieri sera, per coincidenza, dopo 3000 anni ho risentito, perché stavo sentendo appunto un programma musicale, ho risentito Charlie Parker, ho risentito uno Scrap from the Apple con Parker, e devo dire che mi paralizza ogni volta, come mi paralizzava pure quando ero ragazzino, perché ha questo suono, no, con un'emozione dentro unica per me. Ripeto, poi anche qui non voglio cadere nella retorica, perché poi, ripeto, questo è molto individuale, perché un suono ti becca, perché un suono non ti becca, eccetera. Quello è stato veramente il primo suono che infatti è ancora incardinato nella carne, direi, perché comunque quando lo sento, al di là del pezzo che suona, proprio l'effetto è sempre quello di una grossa tempesta emotiva. Come se lui mi portasse da qualche parte, questo suono mi portasse da qualche parte che mi impedisce poi di parlare, ma è profondamente sentito, sentitissimo. E quello forse è stato, naturalmente poi il suono della chitarra di mio padre, infatti la chitarra è un suono che mi commuove sempre. Adoro il suono della chitarra, soprattutto la chitarra proprio semplice, acustica, non elettrica. Il suono che ovviamente mi ha... E qui entriamo nel problema, nel senso che chiaramente quando uno poi raggiunge un po' di età come l'ho raggiunta io, uno si domanda ma la musica è genetica o no? Si trasmette per via genetica, come alcuni sostengono? Io non ci credo. Io ho cominciato a 5 anni e mezzo, è stata un'idea di mio padre che ha comprato un pianoforte, io non sapevo neanche cosa fosse, questo l'ho raccontato tante volte, e praticamente negli stessi giorni ho cominciato sia musica classica che jazz, perché lui fece le cose per bene e procurò anche un insegnante che stava vicino a casa mia, che mi insegnò a leggere e a scrivere la musica e i primi pezzetti. Mentre a casa, tornando poi, sovente lui si metteva seduto vicino a me e mi insegnava a orecchio il blues, mi ha insegnato i primi pezzi americani, Blue Moon e poi Nuage, perché lui era pazzo di Django Reinhardt, quindi Nuage l'ho suonata non so quante volte, Body and Soul. E lui diceva che lui era pazzo di me, perché diceva che io avevo qualcosa di particolare. E una cosa divertente era che sovente io magari imparavo un pezzo che lui mi insegnava a orecchio seguendo mio padre, e magari ogni tanto dicevo ma secondo me questo accordo non è giusto. Io avevo però 7 anni, 8 anni, quello si arrabbiava e dice ma come non è giusto? E qual è quello giusto? E io glielo suonavo quello giusto. Cioè, quindi c'era questo aspetto qui che insomma da una parte lo emozionava, dall'altra... Però gli devo riconoscere una cosa fondamentale, a parte ovviamente l'affetto e tutto, anche che lui mi spingeva a improvvisare. Perché io leggevo con grande facilità, però lui mi spinse a improvvisare. Questo me lo ricordo bene, quando proprio gli chiesi come devo fare. E lui mi disse fai come me. E quindi io piano piano a orecchio cominciai a capire come lui modificava le melodie, come girava intorno agli accordi, eccetera, eccetera. Questo fu il primo proprio apprendimento e quindi di questo ovviamente gli sono grato. E poi dopo ci ho messo del mio, perché i dischi che avevo a casa, che erano poi i suoi, e in particolare quelli appunto di Parker, Konitz, anche Chet Baker, eccetera, sono diventati la mia, diciamo, biblioteca ideale, e io lì andavo a rubare altro oltre quello che mi aveva detto lui. È una storia così particolare, e lui ha fatto appunto anche lui da mediatore tra me e la musica, e quindi è andata così. Poi ripeto, c'è questo interrogativo, ma alla fine non so quanto interessante. Sicuramente se in una casa c'è molta musica è più facile essere, come dire, incantato da questa sirena. E poi naturalmente anche il rapporto con lui fu un rapporto molto forte, perché poi quando un rapporto viaggia attraverso l'orecchio soprattutto, c'è la complicità, c'è anche il gioco. Posso dire che quello è stato un po' il mio gioco infantile, anche, non era una cosa appunto soltanto, era proprio che mi divertivo. Sì, era un po' anche un gioco, perché era un gioco, era una scoperta. Ecco, quello che avevo è che poi anche quando mi sono avvicinato a questi fatidici dischi, io di fatto il jazz l'ho imparato da questi 10 dischi che avevo a casa, oltre, ripeto, dall'input iniziale, dopo l'input iniziale di mio padre. Era la curiosità, ero un curioso, ero un ragazzino curioso che voleva capire come funzionava. Naturalmente c'era prima un'attrazione emotiva di suoni proprio, e poi c'era la voglia di capire come funzionava il giocattolo. E così piano piano ho decodificato questo misterioso linguaggio che era il bebop in particolare. Poi da lì è successo tutto, scoprendo anche che non lo sapevo, che potevo scriverla la musica, oltre che ascoltarla e magari anche imitarla, ma che potevo scrivere la mia, e quello è stato un altro passaggio sicuramente fondamentale.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, because let's see, the reason I started with drums was just out of laziness, you know, because I didn't want to study solfege. I didn't want to, you know, I saw that my sister was just practicing all these Beethoven sonatas and Chopin etudes and stuff, and I associated that with just hard work, you know. And after the whole day at school, it's like I worked enough, you know. So I felt that music was beautiful. I liked it. It moved me, but I wasn't willing to, you know. After I come back from school, now start studying solfege and that. You know, my parents told me, you know, they asked my sister's piano teacher to give me a lesson, and when he told me, he was super cool, very sweet and great musician, but he told me, okay, you know, learn the treble clef and bass clef and start writing, you know, the notes, and I was like, oh, to take the pencil again? Yeah, I guess not, so I passed. But that day when that thing happened with the cookie box, then I realized, without thinking, I just saw it, realized that without knowing solfege, without knowing anything, you just take 2 spoons and you start banging and you are at the heart of the music. And that's, I kind of intuitively understood that as a drummer, you can be in the middle of the music and just like that, you know, you just do it and you're feeling the beat, you're feeling the meaning, the drama, the intensity of the music. The heart, you're very close to the heart of the music in a completely intuitive way, and that was my way in. You know? Of course, as soon as I started doing that, my sister and my brother, who by then he was also playing bass, and they both studied music and kind of developed perfect pitch. You know, they would humiliate me a little bit. You know, they would say that, oh, you're just a monkey who bangs things. You know. And you have no ears, you know, and it's like, so, okay, so then I felt that I needed to develop my ear. I would play piano a little bit when it was free. That wasn't much because, you know, my sister had the priorities and she was serious about it. And I liked it a little bit, and actually, eventually when I started studying classical percussion, I started playing vibraphone a little bit. But the vibraphone, I found that it was kind of like the piano, but much less expressive, especially because the one that I have was a cheap one, that it didn't have a very good sound. So it was a little bit frustrating. And I also saw that it was easy to start playing visually, you know. Once you know the scales, you know how they look, it's pretty easy to start playing a lot of notes, just moving up and down the scale without really hearing them that way, you know. And then I had this thing, like I remember in a little holiday that I took also to Canary Islands, I couldn't take the instrument with me, and I just felt very bored and very lonely. And then I felt that if I had an instrument that I could carry with me instead of the drums or the vibraphone, that's this big thing, you know, just something that I could just grab like the trumpet, you know, that would be amazing, you know. And also I thought that with the trumpet, you have to develop your ear, you know, because you cannot cheat. Trumpet is just like, is the closest to singing. If you cannot sing the note in tune, it's no way you're gonna get the note right, you know. So I thought would be good for ear training too. And then I also realized by then, listening to Miles, to Kenny Dorham, to Art Farmer, that these guys with just one note could just totally touch your heart, you know, and that was much harder to do with the vibraphone, I thought. So I fell in love with the trumpet immediately, and I played trumpet for 10 years. But also during all this time I had been into piano just as a tool to learn harmony, you know, just because the piano is like the most easy in the sense of have access to harmony and orchestra, you know, in order to hear a piece of music, you know, to hear the bass line, the melody, and whatever contra lines can be, or just a general harmonic sense, is a tool for that. So I started playing piano in that way. So, you know, so piano was for discovery of how music functions. Trumpet became ear training and also learning how to phrase and how to tell a story just with phrasing and articulation, you know? And then, after 10 years in the trumpet, then the drums became also just a profession, you know. The whole story is that I went to Berklee. When I was there, all my friends were very sweet and encouraging with my trumpet playing. Oh, Jorge, sounds very nice, man, it's great. Are you available for a session on drums tonight? And so, you know. So yeah, everybody was more interested in hiring me as a drummer, and I kind of just fall in love with all these musicians, you know, like with their music, and I just wanted to play with them, and they needed a drummer more than a trumpet player, or at least they needed me as a drummer more than as a trumpet player. So then it became this social thing, you know. For me, the drums was just a way of making music with these guys, you know, Chris Cheek, Seamus Blake, Joshua Redman, Mark Turner, Cole Rosenwinkel. And so for me, to play with these guys and just to, again, this kind of same feeling that I felt with the Beatles the first time, you know, to be in the center of the music, to be, because that's what I think the drums kind of do, you know, a little bit like a conductor, you know. You have to really have a clear idea of a clear vision of what's the potential of the tune and the musicians who are playing it, and let that unfold, you know, be able to connect with that and to leave space and to push just enough so that can hopefully naturally unfold.
When I was very young, maybe like 6 or 7 years old, my parents decided I should learn an instrument, you know, like everybody in the family. And it was kind of like the normal thing for people like us to do. Yeah, every child has to learn an instrument. And I chose the guitar, I don't know why. So I had classical guitar lessons from the age of 6, 7. And then I went a little bit into the electric guitar and the electric bass and the drum set and very little bit the piano before I discovered really the double bass. And this was when I was 16. And it was like, for me, it was like, yeah, cliche, love at first sight. You know, it was, wow, that's a real instrument, not this artificial stuff with like the power you need for the electric bass and the amplifiers and stuff, but like a real thing. And also, it combines so much of musical history. You know, it has not only pop music in it, like electric guitar, but the whole classical history of hundreds of years and the jazz world. And so this was really like an eye-opener, we would say, you know, for me. Double bass, wow, you know. And I'm still, you know, it's kind of like also cliche, I guess. I still get butterflies, you know, in my stomach. If I see a double bass, I have to take it, you know, I have to play it. So it's really an instrument that I chose to play, and not something that was like, you take the bass, you cannot play the guitar well enough, you have to play bass. This still happens a lot, I think, but in the whole education of double bass playing in the last 20, 30 years, there was a big development. And so we see a lot of people who are small, weak, you know, not like strong, big guys, who can play the double bass incredibly well because the education developed so much, and it's all about technique. You know, it's not about being strong or tall. So there's been a lot of development in this kind of area, and probably like 40, 50 years ago, it was still like, okay, you're the tall man. Look what's in the corner. The big grandmother, you know, the double bass. So this was the bad cliche. And for me, it was always the love of the role of the instrument, of the sounds the instrument can make, of the flexibility and styles the instrument has to offer. And so, yeah, I still love it.
Hi, I'm Quinn Kirchner. Well, music for me it's fun, it's playtime, you know, like kids on the playground, but it's also expression, it's art. It's a human expression of the human emotions, the human nature, you know, existentialism, what it is to be here. And we use music to express something that I think can transcend all language. Anyone, wherever they're from, can relate to music, connects people together. And for me, that's even just doing a tour like this where we're in a different city, sometimes a different country every day, being able to make music and connect with people that we otherwise maybe have a hard time communicating with. That's really the true essence of it. It's all of the human condition communicated amongst all of us outside of the need for any sort of language or written word or spoken language. It's its own language. I think that's what I think of it.